It's become socially acceptable to eat it at any time of the day and to feed it to our children at any time of the day. This is not a cosmetic problem. It's not about being teased at school. This is a public health crisis. You can save your children from this terrible epidemic. Let me show you how. One of the nicest kinds of dinner, I think, is the kind of dinner that comes all in one pot, where you've got your vegetables, your carrots, your carbohydrates, your potatoes, and your protein source. In this case, some nice lean stew meat. And when that's all together in one pot, it's easy, it's a complete meal, and this is actually a really satisfying, hearty meal for young children, especially on a cold day when it's kind of rainy outside like it is today. Okay, so as everything in my kitchen that's savory, this recipe is going to start with onions and garlic. So I'm just going to somehow get the skin off of this onion. I'm just going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut these pieces up. And for stew, they don't have to be finely chopped like they would be for tomato sauce or something like that. You can just cut them in kind of rough chunks like this, because mostly this is just going to add flavor to your stew. So the next thing we have to do is get our garlic ready. Give it a whack to crack the shell. It comes off much more easily that way. This is also just for flavor, so the reason we chop the garlic is just to expose more sides of it to the pot that it's going to be braised in. Wow, that was a strong onion. It's kind of refreshing. It clears your sinuses. So there is our garlic, and I'm just going to put it in with the onions. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to season the meat. And I don't like to wash a lot of dishes, so I try and use the actual paper that the meat was wrapped in as much as possible. I'm just going to unpack it. And then the first thing I'm going to do is just put some salt on it. Remember, we're going to try and hit all of those sensors. We're going to have it be a little bit salty, a little bit sweet, a little bit sour, and it's got the umami flavor or the protein flavor from the meat. And bitter we don't have to worry about because we've got vegetables and things in it, so there's always a little bit of bitter. I'm going to put a bit of pepper on top. The thing about this kind of cooking is that it doesn't matter what spices you use. You can use any spices you like. I picked some that I like. This is chili powder. I'm going to put a bit of chili powder on. You can use anything you like. You can use some paprika and just go for it. It doesn't matter if it gets on the paper because you're going to use those spices when you toss the chunks of meat around in the leftover spices. It's all going to get coated. This is coriander. I love coriander. But if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. Just choose spices that you like and be generous. And the last thing we have to put on is just a little bit of cornstarch. You can use flour, but my 4-year-old can't tolerate wheat, so I use cornstarch. And I'm just gonna dust a little bit of cornstarch, just because that's gonna help the sauce to thicken. Doesn't this look easy? You think it's complicated to make a stew? It is so easy. Okay, so now I've got my big mess of spices and cornstarch and all of that stuff over this meat, and I'm just gonna toss it. It's gonna get noisy. Okay, so there is our meat ready to be braised. Here are some carrots, and you want to cut them in big pieces because the stew is going to be sitting in the oven for quite a while. So if you cut them too small, then the pieces are going to overcook. So I'm just going to cut big chunks like this, and each child will get a chunk, and each adult. And then I have a bowl full of these nice baby potatoes. They've been washed, but you don't have to take the skin off of them or anything. And we're almost done with our stew preparation. What we're gonna do is we're gonna brown that stew meat, and then we're gonna pour a sauce over the meat, and the meat is gonna cook slowly in that sauce. It makes it so tender, the kids love it. Okay, so what goes in here? Let's think. We need something sour, right? So we've got our lemons. It doesn't even matter if some seeds get in there because you're not going to be serving all of the sauce, so the seeds will probably just stay at the bottom of your pot. There's our lemon for the sour. Then, you might not believe that I'm sane, but I'm going to use a little bit of juice because juice is a liquid, so it's going to give us more liquid, and it's a little bit sweet, right? So you're just going to kind of glug in some juice. I'm making a big pot of stew, so you might use less if you're making a smaller pot. Chicken broth is going to add a bit of salty, umami type flavor. And the chicken broth is your backup, so if you're short on fluid at the end, you're going to top it up with chicken broth. That's always a safe bet. Then, I just bought a pasta sauce. You can use any kind of pasta sauce, and you're basically just going to pour, careful you don't get splattered. Do I have pasta sauce on my face? We're going to put some salt in here as well, just to balance off the flavors. I usually add a little bit of, like a leftover bit of wine or something like that, just to help to tenderize the meat. So I'm going to see what we have. Not that we want to put too much in because the children will be eating it too, but a little bit like that will just give it that little bit of bitter flavor as well. Now we're ready to sear our beef. Just pouring the olive oil in, let it get nice and hot, and slide all of my beef that has been covered in the spices and the salt and the pepper and the cornstarch, and let it get nice and brown. No bowl to wash. What we're waiting for now is we're waiting to see that all of the cubes of beef look a little bit browned on each side so that we can see that they've all had a chance to be exposed to the high heat at the bottom of the pot. Now that our beef is starting to look nice and browned on all sides of the cubes, I'm going to add the onion and garlic to get a bit brown and to be exposed to that heat. There's kind of like a thick paste that sticks to the bottom of your pot when you do this kind of braising, and if you can scrape that up with your wooden spoon, it gets into the sauce and gives it a really nice flavor. It's kind of like a real bouillon cube. Okay, so just pour our vegetables on top, put our sauce over the whole thing, and pop it in the oven. And you can see we've almost covered all of our meat and vegetables. So that's going to get nice and tender in the oven if we leave it there for a few hours. Make sure everybody's nice and submerged. Are you guys all in there? There we go. Now I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to put it in my preheated oven. It's heavy, it's like lifting a small child.